people are so fanatical about how they view Marilyn Monroe. And I thought Michelle nailed it. I thought it was just an extraordinary performance. Can we talk a little bit, first of all, about how this project came together, the casting, choosing Michelle for Marilyn?
Well, thank you. Yes, well, as I sort of indicated before, the starting point was Colin Clark's diaries. I was really enraptured by this young man's account of what actually happened. And, you know, as I can still remember when I was a young man wanting to get into show business or film or whatever, and, you know, that story of a young man who got the golden ticket to work on this very particular film, and then the sort of extra golden ticket had a chance to have a sort of intimate insight and relationship with Marilyn, really appealed to me. So it was that appealed to me more than it was a Marilyn story, if that makes sense. Right. But I think as we started to consider casting it and everything, what really focused the mind was that it wasn't a biopic, it wasn't the life of Marilyn. It was a window of time, a moment that was that taught you an awful lot about her life, but it was actually 1 week, 1 month, one shoot in 1956 when Marilyn was 30. So that also focused the mind in terms of casting. And, you know, if you think of 30-year-old actresses in America, there's no one better than Michelle Williams, you know. So I was thrilled when she read it and wanted to meet, frankly. And I remember after meeting her, taking the bus back from her home in upstate New York, just praying she was going to say yes, because I couldn't now imagine doing it with anyone else.
Yeah, there's a couple of moments in there, I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I really kind of forgot I was watching Michelle Williams. She's so dead on as Marilyn Monroe. It's an amazing performance.
I mean, I'd like to take credit for that, but I can't. I mean, she is the most remarkable actress with the most remarkable working process. And, you know, you know, what's interesting about the performance is that, you know, in the film we sort of examine the contrast in acting styles in 1956 between the English exterior theatrical way of working, focusing on the movement and so on, and the American way of working, you know, based in Stanislavski and the method and examining the interior life, the psychology of a character. And of course, great acting really is both, and Michelle does both, you know, and she came to the part by both examining Marilyn's body language, and that little dance she does from The Prince and the Showgirl was a way in. She worked and worked on how Marilyn did that dance, copying the way Marilyn did that dance. And that taught her a lot about Marilyn's body language. And in fact, we read, I think Eve Arnold said that Marilyn's famous wiggle and her walk and so much of her body language was stuff that she had acquired over the years, in the way Chaplin's walk was a contrivance in a way. And so Marilyn herself was built up of these sort of things, and so that was a key to help Michelle do the same thing. And then at the same time, she was really forensically examining Marilyn's psychology, and particularly Marilyn's psychology in 1956, when she came to England with the highest of hopes, because she was determined to change her life. She had left Hollywood and abandoned the studio system and had come to New York, where she'd surrounded herself with her new husband, Arthur Miller. In partnership with Milton Green, she'd set up her own production company in the hope of being able to change the kind of parts she got. And then she was coming to England to work with the great Olivier. So when she walks off that plane, it was potentially the most optimistic moment of her life. And really the story, underneath the story of our film, is how all those things went wrong.
Now, how involved were you in the actual casting process? I know you've worked with Judi Dench before, and Kenneth, I thought, was terrific as Sir Laurence Olivier as well. I mean, Dominic Cooper, it's a really great eclectic mix in the cast. How involved were you in that process?
Completely, yeah. But I sat around for a long time waiting for this film to happen, and you know, had my wish list, you know, and you know, fortunately we were making the film in London, and once we'd cast Michelle and Ken, who are both real magnets to other actors, you know, we were just lucky in terms of who was around and who could play those parts.
I also want to note out, we talked earlier about how this was shot at Pinewood Studios, the historic Pinewood Studios, which you see is depicted in the film, but you were saying there was a story that you were telling me earlier about how it was logistically a little bit difficult to shoot at Pinewood at the time because there were so many movies that were going on.
All
at
the
that
big
time.
movies of the year, like Captain America and Pirates and X-Men, were all being shot there at the time. So we were the little minnow of a production that had to squeeze in between all these big, gigantic.
You're like, guys, we want to shoot a movie that takes place at Pinewood Studios, but we're having a
I
hard
thought
time
they'd
getting
be
into
thrilled,
Pinewood
but they couldn't
Studios.
care less about us.
Pinewood, of course, the historic stage that a lot of the Bond films were shot on and everything. So yeah, it's
But also where Prince and the Showgirl was shot. And
Exactly.
So, they gave Michelle Marilyn's old dressing room.
Oh,
and
wow.
when she did that little dance, it was on the same soundstage at Pinewood where Marilyn had done that dance, half a century before.
Mm-hmm. And talk about working with Eddie on developing the character of Colin, and I mean, like how much of that was drawn on Colin's personal experiences in the diary, and how much of that was maybe embellished a little bit just for dramatic effect?
I can't really answer that to say that my objective was to tell Colin's version of these events, because all those characters would have had different stories or different angles on it, but this was Colin's version of it. So, the script came from his diaries, and Colin's no longer alive, so we can't ask him. It was very much Colin's point of view we were telling.
Absolutely. Now, I know you guys have questions, so if anybody has a question, if you want to raise your hand, I'll call on you, and we'll try to get to as many people as we can. We'll start right here with you, sir.
Thanks for putting Derek Jacobi.
Oh, Derek Jacobi.
Love that guy.
Yeah, me too.
Love that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that is a good point. The scene at the castle. Talk about shooting that. That seemed like a pretty ambitious segment of the film.
Well, only the exterior, when the car drives up, is actually Windsor Castle.
Okay, the rest
That's
sounds
another
good.
very grand house somewhere near London.
The magic of movies. Right over here, sir.
Yeah, did that last scene at the Dog and the Duck actually take place?
Did the last scene of the Dog and Dog take place?
Well, it's a slight embellishment, let's put it like that.
Where was the Dog and Duck? Was that something you built, or was that a pre-existing?
It was a pub on the outskirts of London. We wanted to get that sense of that old-fashioned pub near Pinewood Studios.
Okay. Another question? Nobody has questions? All the way in the back. I'm sorry. There you go.
The only question I have is, since the title is One Week with Marilyn, was that the week that she spent with Colin then?
Yeah, in fact,
Months and months.
there are two books that Colin wrote. The first is called The Prince, the Showgirl and Me, which was the account of the whole film. And he subsequently, 5 years later, published a second book called My Week with Marilyn, which was the hidden week after Arthur leaves London, when he has his very intimate time with Marilyn. So we combined the two into one story, because that week took place within the first book. So it's really talking about, exactly as you say, the intimate days with Marilyn when Arthur was out of the country.
Thank you.
I see a hand right here.
What made you pick the latter as the title of the series?
Probably the word Marilyn is quite a good thing to include in the title.
I thought I said, there we go, right back here.
How long did the actual shooting take?
About 7 weeks. It was a tight schedule, I can tell you.
Yeah. And you shot this a year ago from like about this moment, right?
Yeah, and so when they're in that water, in England in late October, you have to hand it to them. The health and safety people saying to me, they can only go in for 50 seconds at a time. And they were so brave to go in, But we were lucky because so many of our exterior days looked like sort of halcyon summer days, but they weren't.
We should also note this is a sort of a change of pace for you because you come from a background of doing a lot of television movies and BBC originals, and this is kind of I guess doing a movie like this is a little bit more of a different, I would imagine a different experience. Can you talk maybe a bit about the changes that happen in terms of making a bigger film?
Well, people make a big deal of that, but truthfully, for me, the actual shooting wasn't that different. Yes, probably we had a little more time on this than on the TV stuff, but the kind of TV work I'd done at the BBC, with a lot of these actors and the same crew, it wasn't entirely different in a way.
I don't know if if this is embarrassing or not, but I wanted to bring up your very first directorial project was with John Malkovich and was it Miranda Richardson was the two co-stars?
That was, well, I'd worked in the theatre, and that was one of my first television.
Right, your first television directorial.
Yeah.
Good gig.
Scary.
Not bad. and Judi Dench, I mean, can we talk a little bit about Judi? Because she's just fantastic. And she's in every movie that's coming out nowadays, too. She's in J. Edgar as well, which also comes out around the same time.
Yes, she is.
And you've worked with her before. Putting her in this role, there's something about her, like even the simplest of lines, it just has this amazing gravitas to it. Do you even have to direct Judi, or do you just pretty much just say the line and I'm sure it'll be great?
That's what I'm thinking, but I sort of pretend to help her because she is as wonderful as that, and actually she knew Sybil Thorndike, and I think that's one of the reasons she wanted to do this. But they share that sort of warmth and that kindness, and the way that she's as concerned about everyone on the set, both sides of the camera, young and old. She is just the loveliest person, and in fact, the first time I worked with her. On the wrap, she gave me a wrap present of a scarf. And I thought that was incredible because that's what Sybil gives Colin in the movie. Do you know what I mean? But it was, she is that kind of person.
Art imitates life.
Yeah.
Any other questions right over here?
So what was it like to work with Emma Watson? I know she had just come off stopping filming all the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah, I mean, I was really pleased that she was able to take some time off from school to do that. I mean, obviously we didn't work together that long, but I think she's the real deal. She's a really great actress, and it was lovely. Well,
and Emma's probably experienced a little bit of that insanity herself, like trying to walk down the street and having people just mob you.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Very much so.
I saw one in the back, all the way in the very, very back.
I actually have two questions.
Two questions.
One is like, what do you want personally as a director that people take from this movie about Marilyn Monroe? And Michelle Williams as a lead actress in their role, was she skeptical taking this role? Because like he said, Marilyn Monroe, everybody so fascinated on how she was different towards Hollywood.
Could everybody hear that? What did Simon want people to take away from the movie as a director, and was Michelle at any point skeptical about playing that type of role? That was right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, she was understandably nervous. I mean, she wanted to do it, but I think she had to talk herself into doing it. And we had a long sort of dialogue, reading everything, watching everything we could, learning everything we could about Marilyn, and and I think slowly but surely. She was bold enough to take it on, but you couldn't not be nervous about taking that on, and I completely supported that. And what I don't know. I mean, that's a good question about. I mean, I suppose I know this quite answers your question, but we grew to really, really admire Marilyn during the making of this film. But here she, as I was saying before, she had such high hopes. She was so determined to be taken seriously as an actress, and I feel that Olivier served her badly. And yes, she would drive any director crazy, being late on set, the mood swings, not knowing her lines, and so on. But his job as a director was to support her and help her do a good job, and I don't think he did do that. And there's a Peter Bogdanovich quote, I think, that says something like, Marilyn was in bad trouble from the day she was born, meaning that she had such a terrible childhood and was shuffled around from foster home to that. And really, you just had to admire her for doing as well as she did, given the trouble she had in her life. And, obviously, she wasn't to live that much longer after this film. And, it's very sad. And I think one of the other themes in the film with Vivien Leigh is that, there she is, so recently hailed as the most beautiful woman in the history of the world, now at 43 feeling like an old has-been, and that's the cruelty of our culture, or even now, let's face it. But I sort of feel there's that sense of, had Marilyn lived till she was 43, she may well have felt the same thing, and if she kept on living here, maybe she would have ended up in Dallas. I don't mean the TV show Dallas, I don't mean living here, but anything could have happened, couldn't it? And I think part of her enduring mystique is, that we lost her very early.
Well, there's that one scene in the movie that I really think says so much about her as a person, and that is the "should I be her?" When she says that, and then kind of goes into this Marilyn Monroe mode. And it's one of the things that, I mean, just from my own personal experience in interviewing actors all the time, there is that pressure of having to always be in character, and people don't seem to realize these are real people. They have real lives. You know, it's kind of
apparently it's true about Marilyn that she could walk along 57th Street and no one would recognise her, and then she would sort of flip a switch and the whole street would come to a standstill, and we tried to get that in the film.
Or stand over a grate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I know there's been a lot of naysayers on the internet that have said that they don't approve of the idea of Michelle Williams. I think I can safely say you can shut the hell up, because she's great in this movie. I know we had a couple more questions. I want to get one here. Let's go here.
You had said that the film kind of had a long process to get made. What was the timeline, the storyline for that?
Well, it was actually quite long, but because getting the rights to the books, finding the right, getting the script right before it went out to actors. You know, we worked on the script a fair amount. But in fact, I would say, really, it was almost exactly 2 years ago that Michelle and I first met. So it's sort of 2 years from that meeting to now is the time I think about, not the 5 years before that. Do you know what I mean? But it was a long time.
Right here.
In terms of a rollout, we're doing this now. How many other cities are doing this? And it's curious, 2 nights ago, Some Like It Hot was airing, and a number of other Marilyn films were airing. And I just wondered if you're doing some magical tour of having Marilyn show up on some...
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
It's all orchestrated, isn't it?
You're in control of all of that, aren't you?
I don't know.
It was fascinating because 2 nights ago we saw Some Like It Hot.
Wow.
And to come and see this was just incredible.
Yeah, we want to get that point at the end of the film that both Olivier and Marilyn thought this was going to be a great moment in their careers, and it obviously wasn't, The Prince and the Showgirl, but the irony is that they both went on to their biggest successes and in their next jobs, and we wanted to sort of hit that at the end.
Yeah, it was a necessary step to get to that point.
Well,
yeah,
who knows, but it was a step.
There was one in the back, right back there. Go ahead.
One of the interesting characters I thought was Vivian Lee, because she had her own mental issues that she went through later in life. Was her character a little bit bigger in the original drafting of the script, kind of pulled back?
Possibly not, but it might have been at certain points along the way. I mean, it's hard, you know, to work out because there are so many fascinating characters on the fringes of this film. You know, how much emphasis to give them or not. But I'm quite happy by the way it's sort of settled down. And yeah, you're quite right. I mean, there's a whole other film to be made about the relationship between Olivier and I think Vivian Lee was having an affair with Peter Finch or something around this time, and you know, that marriage was doomed to, you know, with Olivier and so on. So I mean, there's a lot bubbling away there too.
Well, and that begs an interesting question too of, was there anything that you guys shot that didn't make it into the final product?
There's a bit, but not too much because, you know, as I say, we had a very tight schedule, so there wasn't a lot of stuff. No.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, that Julie Ormond was terrific as Vivian Lee. I know that was a character that there was a couple of different other possible people that were going to play her. At one point, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and then it was Rachel Weisz, and but I thought Julia was
I don't know,
phenomenal.
that could be you guys on the internet. I don't know, I don't remember that.
I'm just going by IMDb. It's all lies on there anyway. But right here, sir.
Yeah, I just wonder if you could comment on, you know, Olivier suggests that Monroe's whole demeanor is kind of a guise. Just what you think about, you know, whether she was naive and vulnerable or deliberately manipulative or maybe unconsciously manipulative.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to know what mental health professionals would say about that. You know, but because you know, clearly now she would be diagnosed as bipolar or borderline personality disorder, with, you know, with the shifting moods and everything. And I don't know how much of her shtick, if you like, was conscious or unconscious, but it was probably a mixture of both in a way. Do you know what I mean? Just as her ability to attract men and then sort of push them away or whatever it was. Do you mean? I mean, one of the interesting things about this film is that, or this moment in her life, I should say, is it's really the only evidence of her showing any interest in a younger man, and that all the men she surrounded herself with were sort of high status, alpha male, influential men. If you think about, Miller and DiMaggio and the Kennedys and so on, and let alone all the sort of Hollywood people. And Michelle had a very interesting insight, which was that she thought, Marilyn and her method mode realized that in The Prince and the Showgirl, Marilyn's character is intrigued by the young prince in the embassy, and that actually Marilyn, by showing interest in Colin Clark, was somehow investigating that aspect of the character, which I think is interesting.
That's very interesting. All right, we're going to take 2 more questions and we're going to wrap it up, so make them really, really good. All the way in the back over here, and then you're next over there, so hold on to yours. Right here first. Did you do any other research on Marilyn and the time period this was going to be shot in for your movie? Is that's what you were asking? That's a hard time hearing, I'm sorry. Did you do any other research
we watched
for the time period?
YouTube, and all that stuff, it's incredible, how much there's footage on the wedding and the press conference about the wedding with Miller that was a few weeks before, and there's footage of them coming off the plane that we recreated, actually, that body language of Miller just behind, coming down the steps, surrounded by the pilots. Or actually, there's a photograph I had in my office, which was Arthur, Marilyn, Olivier, and Vivian doing a photo call at Parkside House, the house they were renting. And we actually shot at that house. So, we had the 4 of them in the same costumes, in the same configuration, standing on the same porch as they had done. It's kind of special in it, I thought, anyway. And we were recreating, actual images.
Okay, and the last one back over here. I saw a hand back over here. Or was it? No?
Doesn't have to be the last
Okay,
one.
right here.
What project are you working on now?
What project are you
This
working on
film,
now?
actually. It's we only finished quite recently, and
One at a time.
I waited so long to make this film. I'm very happy to be at events like this. Very happy. We can have a few more. We can have a few more.
We did? Okay.
I was wondering, how much did Colin actually consult on this one?
How much did Colin consult on this?
Very little, because he passed away about a decade ago.
Oh, I didn't know.
There's one right back over here.
I was wondering, what book was Arthur Miller working on?
Oh, that is a good question.
He was writing those notes.
I don't know. I mean, they were his journals. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know.
Death of an actress.
Yeah. But there is it After the Fall play that references, the actress figure in that reads a diary or something. So I don't know. I mean, I can't say what he was actually doing, but that was a very significant turning point in the marriage. It did last for some years, but I think Lee Strasberg is quoted as saying, that when she read his criticism of her, she could never fully sort of trust him ever again.
And did y'all have those notes?
No. But we had quotes like, say, Strasberg had said, she'd said, Miller had written, he was disappointed in her, and that sort of thing.
Okay, did there ever one more over here? Okay, this will be the last one.
What about some of the other quotes, like Olivier's Prospero quote at the end, or some of the lines in the movie? I mean, did you take that from Colin's books, or did you?
I think the Prospero thing is something we added, actually, just because we like the idea that sometimes Olivier could only really express himself by quoting Shakespeare, like that scene earlier on where he's so frustrated and his own language won't express it. It's like he quotes from Shakespeare to express his frustration.
I love watching Ken in that role too. There's been Oscar talk about this film. How do you react to that? Like when you hear things like Oscar buzz, and have you got a speech ready just in case?
No, but I mean, I am a fan of actors, and it's a love letter to actors, as I was saying before. And nothing would please me more than these actors, or some of these actors, or an actress getting the any sort of acclaim that I think they deserve.
Mm-hmm. My Week with Marilyn opens November 23rd. Please tell everybody that they have to go see it. Simon Curtis, thank you very much for coming to Dallas.
I appreciate it. I love you.